Okay, here is a field gauge for checking the struts. This is so you don't have to drag the bottle. And the fill gauge is with you to each location for individual check of a strut. So what I'm going to do now is, it has a very similar bayonet to the charging sort of thing, but it's only attached to a pressure gauge and it's deadheaded. So what you do, basically attach it in the same fashion, make sure your bayonet is backed out. If you don't, when you attach it, you will lose the nitrogen that's in there. Okay. And again, about 50 inch-pounds is the rating for these fittings.
Nice crescent wrench.
Okay. Once you have it attached and you believe it's sealed, just turn the bayonet in, and that should give you the reading that you're seeing in the strut. To remove it without losing your nitrogen, you always have to turn the bayonet out, retracting the pin that's inside of it. Once you have that off, you hear a little burst of air. That's just the air that's in the gauge and the chuck. That's a minimum loss, but if you check it over and over and over, you will lose a little bit each time. Reattach your cap nut, snug, seal, dirt out, and you're good to go. Okay, we're here today to show you how to charge a Delta counterbalance strut. And normally you could do this in the barricade. You don't have to take it out. So, but for demonstration purposes and vision aids, we're going to do it here, which will be more clear for you than trying to crawl inside of a barricade. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is remove the safety sealing cap to the pin valve. Looks very much like a tire valve on a vehicle. And then we're going to attach our charging chuck. On the charging chuck, you have a bayonet on the top here. You always want to make sure it's open. That means you've withdrawn the pin, and when you attach it, you will leak no nitrogen out of the strut itself. Now when you tighten these, the foot-pounds is about 50 foot-pounds is the rating to tighten the nut. If you tighten more and more and more, you will have to buy and replace these parts more often. Give it just a light snug. Okay, here we have a high pressure nitrogen gauge charging setup already connected to our nitrogen bottles. And what you have in here is typically two gauge faces. The gauge on the right is the tank pressure. The gauge on the left is the strut pressure. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn in our bayonet on our charging chuck, and you will be able to see, hopefully, the pressure inside the strut. Right now this strut is showing us about 900 psi. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the gauge that feeds, oops, that's our bleed off. I'll get to that in a second. Anyway. Okay, you can read on the right hand gauge that our tank pressure is about 2200 psi. And depending on the size of your barricade, the strut pressure will change. So I'm going to turn in the bayonet here, which increases the line pressure to the strut, and we'll bring this one up to about 1600 psi. Okay, now we'll let it sit for an instant, because the gas going in and out will change temperatures, and the amount of volume will change as the temperature changes. See, we've gotten up to 1700. Now, fortunately on this gauge setup, when you back the bonnet out, it has a bleed off that you can hear that will bleed the pressure out of the line. Let it sit. It looks like we're fairly stable at 1600 psi. So I'm going to close the tank valve. Okay, always when you remove this chuck, you always want this bayonet backed out. If not, the pin is depressed and your nitrogen will escape from your strut. So it's backed out. Now when you open this fitting, you will hear the nitrogen line bleeding out from the gauge system. That's not a leak from the strut, provided that you've backed the bayonet out.
Nice crescent wrench.
Beautiful crescent wrench.
That's...
Okay, now, and then you always want to reinstall your cap, because it's obviously keeps any foreign material out, plus it has a sealing washer that when you give this snug gives you an extra layer of sealing.
Hello, my name's Glenn. I'm working with Delta Scientific here on the HD300 barrier, and what we're going to do today is demonstrate the replacement of the counterbalance system. Alright, to get to the point to replace the counterbalance system, we've removed the front face and we've disconnected the chains so that we can elevate the barrier top plate to 40 inches. When we get it to 40 inches, we're at the free play zone in the pins. We need to have this elevation so that the pins will remove easily without having to compress the counterbalancers. We've also disconnected the actuator. We are supporting the top plate with a forklift so that we can remove those, and we also have our safety bars installed. Right here we have one of our counterbalances. This is attached with a retainer, a washer, and a pin. The retainer is a basic hitch pin. And then we have this clevis pin. Installation is just as easy. After you've installed the pin at the bottom, you line it back up, put the pin back in, make sure it's lined up with the bushing, add the washer and the retainer.